One of the most important parts in your job as a fundraiser for your nonprofit organization is to become an excellent storyteller. And sometimes that's easier than other times. It depends a lot on the nature of your organization and the stories of the people who you serve. But if you keep in mind what a few things that stories actually can do for you, it might make it easier for you to pick the stories that you choose to tell.
So we're going to cover 4 concepts that stories cover: history, identity, memory, and culture. So let's start with history. One of the things that sometimes organizations like to do a lot is to communicate when they were founded and what their organizational status is and all of these kind of really, frankly, boring details. And we don't want to do that, but we still want to have the ability to communicate the history of our organization. So I want to suggest that you come up with a story that reflects the history of your organization. For example, we worked with an organization called North Country Healthcare, which actually started out as the Flagstaff, Arizona Free Clinic. And it was founded by Dr. John Caskey III. And what he did was that he was a doctor in the emergency room in Flagstaff, and a woman came in to get some health care treatment for her son. And he said, "You have to follow up with your pediatrician with this son." And she said, "Okay, Dr. Caskey." Next week, she comes back in. Same child, other ear is infected. "You have to follow up with your pediatrician," says Dr. Caskey. "Oh, well, yes, Dr. Caskey, I'll do that." A couple weeks later, she's back. This time, the kid is in screaming pain, still has 2 ear infections, and Dr. Caskey, in a moment of exasperation, says, "I told you to follow up with your pediatrician." To which she answers with equal levels of frustration, "Well, I would, Dr. Caskey, but I can't find a doctor who will take me." And that was the moment when Dr. Caskey realized there were people who could not get basic care in our community. And so he chose to found the Flagstaff Free Clinic out of his station wagon, his car, that weekend at the health department. So those are the types of stories that you can tell that really get at the heart of how you have the history of your organization that you do, without saying, here's when the organization was founded.
Another thing that stories can do for you is they can help establish the identity of your organization. And if you think about it from a personal perspective, when you are establishing your identity with somebody that you meet for the first time, do you give them the juiciest stories? Do you tell them all your secrets and these amazing things that have occurred to you? Of course you don't. You tell them safe stories until you start to form a relationship with them. And the identity that they have with you, that person who has met you for the first time, is going to be very different from the person who's known you for a little while, who might have known you for years, because the stories that you've shared have established a very different identity. When my children were younger, I was a single dad. It was my responsibility to look after my children when I was home in our community, but I also traveled a great deal, and when I was on the road, they stayed with their mother, which I thought was a great deal, the best opportunity to spend time with both of us under the circumstances. But if you met me at home, if you met me when I am Mr. Mom looking after my kids as a single dad, the stories that you heard were about me being a Cub Scout leader and about me being a member of the PTA, the Parent Teachers Association, or participating in their hockey games or soccer games or whatever they might be. But when I was on the road working for the company that I served, I was a salesman. It was my job to take business people out and show them a good time. So you'd hear stories about me. I'd be in a tuxedo holding a martini, which were very different stories than if you saw me in my Cub Scout uniform with my little scout. When you tell the stories that establish the identity of your nonprofit, keep in mind that you want to be purposeful about the identity that you create.
Now, the other thing that stories help do is establish memory, because it's much easier to remember the stories that an organization tells rather than the facts and figures. I used to work for an organization called Lowell Observatory, where they discovered Pluto, which is still a planet.
Yes, it is.
I think, personally. But anyway, they discovered Pluto there, and they have a lot of different facts and figures that are involved in Lowell Observatory. And sometimes it can be really difficult to remember all those things. But if you can tell stories, and you can help create and craft something that helps it make it easier to remember these stories, that is a much more effective way. So for instance, one of the things that happens at Lowell Observatory is they used to have the Near-Earth Object Search, looking for asteroids and comets that potentially could collide with the Earth and frankly, destroy us all.
That would be a bad thing.
That would be a bad thing. And one of the stories that Bob Millis used to say, who's the director emeritus of Lowell Observatory, he used to say, you know, there is a higher probability of getting killed by an asteroid or comet hitting the Earth than getting killed in a plane crash. And that was really memorable.
Wow.
But then he also says that's also an example of how you can manipulate statistics. So that's a way that you can use stories to help remember things that are factual for your organization.
Well, and the fourth thing that stories can do for you is it helps create the culture of your organization. Think about that. What is the culture of your nonprofit organization? Are you conscious of what that is? Can you tell looking around? Because I will propose to you that people that may not be a part of your organization, they know what your culture is. Think about it from the perspective of walking into a business or some office or something, and you see people interacting, and you're walking in, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, these people hate each other in here. That's because they don't have a very good culture. So the stories that you tell, what culture are you creating? Be conscious of how the stories that you share create the culture for your organization, both externally with your donors or financial supporters, but also internally with your team. So it's important that you think about these four elements that stories can help you succeed at. You have the ability to share history. You have the ability to establish identity, to reinforce memory, and to create culture. So be conscious of the stories you tell and how it does these four things for you in the storytelling process.